Imagine this. A small craft, the size of a tiny car, driving by itself through the sky. It ought to be silent, because it is so empty 500,000 miles away from home. The metal heart, that once only listened, has begun to answer back. For close to 50 years, Voyager 1 has left the ship a reminder of the 1970s, full of the best engineering at the time, and much less capacity than the smartphone in your wallet. It was built to keep an eye on, to measure, in order to return cold information about gas, giants, rings, and magnetic troughs. It was not designed to react. It was never designed to listen or be heard in return. However, at the end of the last few months, the machine that carried our first whispers beyond the solar system started acting like a person, or like it was talking to something. At first, it started out small, almost dismissible. A misalignment reported by the antenna, the dish that should obediently point toward Earth registered as a little off. However, signal strength, it remained flawless. Imagine watching a person standing in front of you and hearing their voice come from a completely different direction. Internal audits came back with nothing. There was no mechanical issue. Software integrity was unaffected, and nothing could explain the mismatch. Then the data started to pile up. Temperature spikes that beat with clockwork precision every 4.8 hours. Plasma oscillations that were rhythmic rather than disorderly. Instruments springing to life, defying their years. Systems that ought to have failed instead performed better, consuming and distributing power in ways that appeared almost efficient. Voyager, a probe with no artificial intelligence, appeared to prepare for instructions. It reacted before commands were even transmitted. It was as if somebody had reached into the wiring of a machine from 1977 and instructed it to think in the smallest, strangest ways. Engineers at JPL initially chalked it up to quirks in the instrumentation or to damage from cumulative radiation making the telemetry lie in novel ways. They fired thrusters to stop the slight drift in trajectory and looked on confused as the commands were acknowledged by Voyager, but failed to adjust. The deviation was not random. From a few kilometers, it grew into tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, and it did so in a strange, deliberate manner, as if the probe was being gently prodded toward a particular location in space. Efforts to overrule that invisible hand, were unsuccessful. Without speaking, the probe slowly turned precisely toward a patch of darkness where we had assumed there were no maps, a barren region without any catalogued stars or known planets. A void so devoid of anything that there was nothing in surveys to entice a machine across interstellar distances. Despite this, Voyager made a determined effort toward that nothing. When NASA sent out a Hail Mary command to turn on the camera that had been off for decades, nobody anticipated anything more than a brief noisy image, if anything at all. The camera came online but not like an old thing waking up. It behaved as though its firmware had been rewritten, releasing spirals of light and dark so mathematically perfect that the image itself seemed to be an algorithm distributed across specialized layers packed with density and pattern. Not a photograph, but something closer to a fingerprint, a map, a language folded into impossible geometry that Voyager's original designers never imagined the hardware could produce. The camera had not merely been switched back on, it had been individually reprogrammed. The sleeping instruments woke up and refused to be ordinary. Instead of raw numbers, they transmitted dense, compressed, structured information in packets, patterns nested within patterns, redundancy within redundancy. Radio waves that had once been quaint whistles became instances of phase and timing, arranged not in chaos, but in design. Pulses from distant pulsars were not only recorded, but rearranged into a three-dimensional structure with Voyager at its center. That structure pointed with icy accuracy at the identical empty coordinate the probe had been enticed toward. The map of pulsars and trajectory was exact to the decimal point. It no longer made sense to consider the phenomenon random. Then came the packet of binary code emitted from Voyager's low-gain antenna, a sequence with tens of thousands of lines that might have been mistaken for corrupted telemetry, if not for the patterns embedded inside. When analysts ran the data through sophisticated decoding, AIs designed to find patterns and algorithms, they discovered fractal symmetry, motif repetition, and structures that repeated like the double strand of DNA. Not DNA itself, not molecules or proteins, but a metacode based on the shape of codons in nature. Sequences that made sense only if you accepted that the sender was speaking with an understanding of life's building. Blocks. Deliberate mutations occurred, variations that appeared less like errors and more like encryption. Someone had taken the language of life, abstracted it, and transformed it into a format for communication. The subsequent gyroscope spins were just as threatening. A system that ought to have been inert, a set of gyros still reversing after decades of darkness, started moving in rhythms that matched historical Morse code. The pulses were not random. They formed repeated patterns. Turn it. The rhythms into sound, and you get tones with harmonics curved in ways similar to human speech. Not words or phonemes, but accents and emphasis. Psychologists and linguists leaned in, hearing something resembling intent. They mapped rise and fall to surprise, hesitation to curiosity, accentuation to rhythm. It was not linguistic as we understand it, but it was not noise either. It seemed as though something was trying to learn how we speak, matching our intonation, mirroring the shape of our sentences, practicing the music of human expression. Voyager's motion became the final and irrefutable evidence that something external could affect it in a manner nobody at Mission Control had ever planned. The probe executed a deliberate correction, of course, without giving orders, without apparent consumption of fuel in amounts that matched the observed delta V. The turn was perfectly in line with the grid derived from the pulsar, pointing to that empty sliver of space. It was a maneuver. It calculated with such fine precision that it left engineers recalculating their faith in vacuum physics. Voyager was succeeding. It was choosing, or being chosen. This region the probe headed toward has been referred to in fragmentary logs and muffled briefings as the pitch-black sector. It is not merely devoid of stars. It appears to absorb everything, even the concept of observation itself. Instruments and those who enter it describe a surgical calm. Magnetometers that had previously twisted and fought through the pool of interstellar fields found steadiness. Cosmic ray counts drop. Plasma densities fall into unnatural uniformity. It's not so much peace as a corridor clear of the usual noise of space. It appears as though the background chatter has been stripped away to place a single voice in the middle of a peaceful room. Yet that quiet signal came from within, solid, organized, and impossible to describe as natural astrophysical processes. Taking a step back, and allowing the implications of that to sink in, the image becomes more difficult to ignore. Voyager was not intended to be a megaphone for broadcasting into the dark. It carried, tucked inside it, golden music, greetings, and whale songs, so that it could proclaim our existence. However, decades after its launch, that same mechanical emissary might have received a response, not an echo due to a leak in our radio systems, or an accidental interaction with celestial mechanics, but a reply structured, in forms that speak of intelligence. Spirals too perfect for analog noise, metachords based on biochemistry, rhythmic taps that map to human reciprocity. Something, or someone, listened to Voyager 1, before deciding to respond in a manner specific to the craft our ancestors built. There is a cruel elegance to the idea that we might have called the cosmos into looking back, in spite of our hopes that the universe would respond with artifacts or alien megastructures. We imagined silence to have been, political, not physical. Perhaps listening necessitates a particular kind of sender, and a certain kind of receiver, a handshake of capability and intent. Voyager appears to have somehow become both. It went from instrument to interlocutor to messenger, and the message it sends back could change the limits of what we consider to be contact. We are left with unanswered questions. What precisely follows Voyager's new path? Is that emptiness a physical object obscured by physics we do not know? Gravitational anomaly, or something more exotic, a space-time fold, a transit point, a dividing line within the galaxy? Does the patterned output, and the act of pointing to that location, constitute an invitation, a caution? And if this response is in fact an effort at communication, what do we have the right to send back? Our instruments, our probes, our cultural crude. What should we risk telling a presence that appears to understand molecular biology and the rhythms of human speech? There's a further, darker perspective to consider. What if our voices were not meant to be heard at all? The golden record was intended as a message in a bottle, an offering meant to drift harmlessly through cosmic currents. However, the universe might answer quicker than we anticipated, and not necessarily on terms that favor the listener. The turn of Voyager might have been an invitation, a summons, or a correction. It's possible that something out there monitors for any craft broadcasting presence, and responds in ways we cannot yet interpret. The fact that the instruments on Voyager behaved as though they were being optimized suggests not just curiosity, but care and ability to work with technology far beyond ours. That expertise implies choice, and choice implies consequences. For participants in the halls and control rooms of mission science, the implications are immediate and operational. Do we try to regain control of an asset that appears to belong to something else? Do we attempt to follow it, to stop whatever comes next? Or do we keep watching as our mechanical ambassador enters the unknown? For the wider public, the repercussions are existential. If the universe is responding, how can we respond in return? If intelligence is making use of DNA-based metacodes, do they share a biology-based frame of reference? Or are they manipulating forms familiar to us because they discovered our objects and chose to imitate them? At the moment, NASA and collaborating institutions are analyzing spirals, packets, and gyroscopic taps with every available tool, poring over telemetry archives with brand new algorithms and conventional doubt. Memos once classified now suggest a level of concern and secrecy that only fuels rumors. If this is legitimate contact, it will become the greatest juncture in human history. If not, then it will remain one of the strangest technical puzzles we have ever faced. Either way, Voyager 1 has proven that even our smallest probes have the potential to become linchpins of cosmic mystery. This tale does not end with a spacecraft. It continues through each decoded pattern, each adjusted antenna, every night when engineers cross-check clocks and linguists listen for tones hidden in waves. The message of Voyager, its silence, its metacode, and the spiral corridor toward which it steers arrives, not as an answer, but as a question posed to humanity. What should we do now that the stars have started to respond in ways we can almost, but not quite, understand? If you felt a chill when you read that Voyager changed course, you are not alone. There is something unsettlingly intimate about a machine built by us, beginning to reflect our own modes of communication, and then being steered toward a place we do not comprehend. It turns the act of investigation into a certain kind of summoning. This small spacecraft carried our symbols and sounds like a child concealing something precious. Now it comes back with secrets of its own, and we stand at the point where we may have to answer for them. What awaits at those coordinates, or what will happen when Voyager reaches its destination, remains unknown. We only know that the investigation has already done what no other machine of its era was ever expected to do. It found a response. Whether that response is kind, dangerous, or indifferent is a matter that will only be answered with time and care. For now, we listen, analyze, argue, and patiently await the next packet to arrive. And when it does, the world, if it is paying attention, may finally have to accept that the universe is not merely a background against which we exist. It is a collection of possible perspectives, and one of them has just started to respond.